All right, right.
What's the toughest opponent on your non-conference schedule? I mean, they're all good people that can beat you, but
they're all. We don't look at them any of them more than the other. I know in this state people are very excited about the Auburn game. That's an in-state non-conference game. An SEC opponent. I also spent a lot of time in college. Seeing North Texas, was beat by them last year. Lost to Tulane a couple of years ago. So it doesn't. I understand what we're asking the question for, but they're all important.
Now that the portal dust has settled a little bit, I know you still have some to bring in, but just how do you feel like it went, I guess?
I think I'll be able to tell you that more when we start playing, and I can actually see, right now it's off of film. There's here. I was explaining this to my wife. I was like, you're trying to explain to people that ask you this question, and you run the risk of sounding like the guy who lost his girlfriend, and you're like, well, her breath stunk anyway, and it's like, but the reality of it is when you lose 8, 9, 10 people, some of them you got better at, some of them you stayed about the same, and some of them you didn't get better at, and that's what you deal with, and that's the reality of our system right now. Obviously there will be changes needed and things like that, but when you're not one of the conferences that gets the revenue share, then when you lose pieces, you don't have anything to go shop with. That's why you see some of the professional leagues out there, these transfer fees, they come take a player. Man United takes a player, they give you something for the player, and your club stays going. They'll figure all that stuff out. There's some brilliant people at the heads of college football right now, so I'm sure they'll figure all that out.
Not everybody who loses their starter has a guy like Bishop sitting there, though, so how good do you feel about that situation?
Well, the reality of it is I'm very grateful because, people that don't have a lot of depth in terms of, they're not around the game a whole lot. I'm not saying that they're not smart or can't figure it out, but they're not around the game a whole lot. They just think that guy lost all these players and there's nobody else there. Well, no, there's players that played that position with him. This guy might have got the start, but this guy played 35 snaps and the other guy played 30 snaps in the ball game. And so it's not like you really lost a starter. There's some times where you lose a player who'd never played a play, but he's just in that number that they look in terms of what you lost. So I'm very fortunate as a head coach, as a quarterback coach for Bishop Davenport, who started ball games for us last year and won ball games as a starter and has won games as a starter at other schools. Very fortunate, and excited for him and his opportunity.
Coach, what is the most difficult part about evaluating transfers?
The film is probably the easiest, just trying to get a read on their personality in terms of work ethic. You can do some things to find out their processing ability and what some of their football acumen is, but really it's just your daily personal interactions, how they're going to respond to this kind of practice, how they're going to respond to this kind of opponent or this situation. When it hits the fan and we're supposed to be up by 14 and we're down by 7, how's this kid going to react? I know how the kid reacted last year that I had, but how's this one going to react, or vice versa? If we jump out the gate and we're 7-0, is this kid going to have more of our team's mentality, or is he going to have the mentality that he's had from that program that he's been with the last 3 years? So just trying to, just what's between the ears is the hardest part.
How big a challenge is it at mid-major level with the transfer portal and you guys losing? I mean, every team loses a lot of guys, and for you to prepare for that next season for those other teams.
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge. It is a challenge no matter, you can try to sugarcoat it whatever way you want it. It is a challenge, but it's, sometimes it's, I don't know how daunting of a challenge that is because I think we lost some good players, but I thought we've got some good players. As a competitor, I felt, I've got a really good team, and we don't play to the ability of what we can play. Or we've got a team that, is a 70 on overall ability, but they play up to an 85 every week. And they beat 2 or 3 teams that they shouldn't beat. And then 2 or 3 teams that are at 85 don't play at 85. And they play down to a 75, and you beat them. And now all of a sudden, I've been on those type of teams. At Rice, we were not a dominant, talent team, and we were a 7-5 football team that went to a bowl game because we played disciplined, clean ball. So, how all this, plays itself out, that's hard to tell on May 6th, May 7th. It's more or less about, getting these guys in, getting them acclimated in the last part of May, June, July, being able to go through your process in terms of, your scheme and getting them ready to go.
3 straight winning seasons for the program, 2 straight bowl wins. What's success in 25?
I don't know. I don't know yet. That's a great question. You know, I don't know what that number is. I don't know what that magic number is. I know 3 months ago, I think they had us picked to win our side of the league. I think probably that'll change. You know, so I don't know. You know, again, I mean, you're talking to someone who I don't pay attention to much of that stuff. You know, been an underdog a lot of my life as a competitor. I know I went to a great school like Texas. It wasn't an underdog all the time. You know, it was, you know, a favor. But at the end of the day, my mentality is none of that stuff really matters. I'm not paying attention to what people think or the prognostications. What we need to focus on is having great, you know, June, great July, great August. I've just been in too many ball games where you can take some of that stuff and throw it out the window.
Thank you, Coach.
All right, thank you.